So hello and welcome to our webinar on poetry, Poetry Month meeting Robotics Week. So I got really excited when I noticed it was Robotics Week, and I said, I know Katie Henry from BirdBrain Technologies would love to come do a webinar with me. And then I actually met Bud. Bud, what year was that? Was that 2 years ago? 3 years ago?
It was a while. No, it was longer than that. It might have been 4 or 5 years ago.
5 years ago. It was like 2016.
Okay.
Something, but
we met. It was about 3 years ago. It sounds like.
That's still a long time. We met at the National Writing Project when I was doing a makerspace workshop for the writing workshop, like how a writing workshop could be a maker workshop. And it was like one of the most amazing workshops I've ever done. And I love the National Writing Project. I'm giving them a shout out because my background is in being an English teacher. And I used to go to that all the time when I was an English teacher. Oh, someone else met you, Bud, Maureen. But Bud and I met at that. And so we have that writing connection already. So I was really excited when I found out Katie and Bud knew each other and that they were actually presenting this summer at another conference that I had wanted to go to. So Bud, wait, I'm supposed to introduce you better than this. So Bud is at Clearview Library District. He is amazing. He does know a lot about poetry and creating robots. And we're going to ask this question that's going to introduce you better, I think, than me saying a whole bunch of stuff about how awesome you are. I do know that on Bud's Twitter, he has like a picture of him at the White House. And I actually have never asked him to explain that to me. So he might have to do that now. And then
the after party, the after show will be great.
Yeah.
We'll talk about all that.
Katie from BirdBrain Technologies, when did we meet?
Oh gosh, it's been more than a year. Yeah.
Oh, we met here in Austin though, in person. That was our first time to actually see each other in person. And then Tom is our other Makey Makey person here. Tom is our train the trainer, amazing guy who teaches people how to teach people. That's so confusing. It's so meta, like teach people how to teach people. But I'm going to go ahead and let Bud start off a little bit, but I do want to talk to Bud and Katie about the Poetry and Robotics workshop that you led at that was Casey Shea's Make. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, I have this sticker on my computer and I can't remember the name of the conference.
Remake Education. Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
Remake Education, that was it. So Remake Education, you led this workshop. I thought it sounded so cool, and that's part of the inspiration for this webinar. So I think I just kind of want to know a little bit more about how you decided to mash poetry and robots together.
Well, so it's actually Casey's team's fault. Katie is the type of person, as you know, Colleen, who when you meet her, suddenly you meet other people because she puts people together, and it's a great asset. And it's a lot of fun. But we were talking with the folks in Sonoma County about the possibility of, we weren't even sure what, they were interested in doing some professional development around making a la the writing project model that you mentioned earlier. And Katie knew I was a writing project person. So we started talking, and we were, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes into that conversation when I think it's Kelly Materi there, who's a language arts teacher as well as a UDL person. And she does a bunch of things, but she said something along the lines of, I feel like there's English over here and there's all the tech STEMmy stuff over here. And I just want to Ada Lovelace this up, is what she said to us. And she said it a little stronger than that, but I'm censoring for the moment. And that was one of those moments that about 15 minutes later, Katie and I had agreed, we thought maybe, to think about what it means to Ada Lovelace poems and robots. And by that I mean, and you should spend some time in the story of Ada Lovelace. And of course, like all good poetic stories, it's embellished, and the truth, the capital T truth that's in it and the little case T truth that's in it are very different. But as you go digging, you'll find that Ada Lovelace was the daughter of Lord Byron, poet. And she was also friend and colleague with folks like Charles Babbage and Charles Dickens. And she was really into science. She was really into poetry. She actually called what she did poetic science. And as Katie and I started thinking and marinating in this concept, realizing that we were going to spend some time on it, what we realized along the way was the actual origin of the word poetry comes out of a Greek root. It's poesis. which is a fun word to say. And if you're at home right now, you should just exclaim, even if you're around people and you have headphones on, just say poesis, because it feels fun to say. But as you can see on the screen there, the Greek root, it means the activity in which somebody makes something, or a person brings a thing into being. And that gives us poem, the thing that's made. It gives us poet, the person who makes. It gives us maker. And so the etymology of this was so delightfully dynamic that we thought we would try to see if we could figure out a way to put robots and poems together. And we've been doing that in a bunch of different ways. We've done this live workshop a few different times. We're doing some writing around it. And I found this article last week that I feel like really encapsulates what the intersection of poetry and robotics means. This is a piece by Louise Rosenblatt. She wrote it for Language Arts Magazine, or a journal, in 1980, which I don't know if you guys remember, but before the internet was a thing, people would read these paper-based journals. Still do, and they're still available through your interlibrary loan at your library. There's the library plug. But she says right in here, and it's hard to see it because this is a crummy copy that I made, but it says a poem is not a ready-made object to which a reader is passively exposed. A poem is a happening, an event in which the listener or reader draws on images and feelings and ideas stirred up by the words of the text. Out of these is shaped the lived-through experience. And I love this idea of the poem is happening, the poem is event. And that's what a robot is. The robot is happening. The robot's event. And so when we talk about poems and robots, more and more, we're talking about robots as poems, and sometimes even poems as robots. And hopefully we'll get a little bit further into that today. We've gone almost 5 minutes into this conversation without a poem being introduced into the room. So may I have your permission to read a poem, Colleen?
It is permission granted.
Okay, and Katie and Tom, you're on board?
Go for it.
Can I also, before you read the poem, say that I love Louise Rosenblatt and that I have a master's in education and reading. And so I've read a lot of Louise Rosenblatt.
As you would, then you know that a robot is a text.
Yeah,
right?
A robot is a text. I love it.
There's all this integrative garbage that we get into at school about, well, the texts happen in the English class and the robots happen in the STEM class or whatever. And I guess the thing that Katie and I have been marinating in and playing with is this idea that, no, it's composition, and they live in both places. And we'll talk more about that. But if I may read that poem, it's short and I will read fast. Audience, you do know when a poem is read in the makerspace, we do snap at the end. So please snap along at home once we're done. But this is Hope is like owning a trophy. There's not a lot of good in the world right now, except when I decide otherwise. So I've decided that we'll decide. Otherwise, who gets to say what's coming next? Who's gonna tell me I'm doing it wrong? Why would I listen to them anyway? Hope is like owning a trophy. And I know where they make those things. That lady owes me a favor and I'm about ready to collect. Hope is like owning a trophy.
That's great.
And so what I think we want to do with you guys right now is actually do a little poetry and start doing what we would do in a workshop, if that's okay, with your permission. Yeah, good. I hope everybody at home brought something to write with, or if not, they have something to write with. They're sitting at a computer. You can use those for writing. I don't know if you know, it's the big blue square with the white W on it that nobody likes to open. It's called Word. You can write in that. You can write in your favorite text editor. You can even write in your favorite code editor. If you've got Make Code open, you can write your poem right there. But we use a tool called Taylor Molly's Metaphor Dice. And I have them right here in front of me. And they're this great thing that everybody should have 5, 10, 15 sets of that help you get started with writing poems or building robots. And both things work. And what I've done is I've taken the liberty of rolling a few rolls from the Taylor Molly Poetry Dice. And what I'm gonna do is give you 3 prompts. And then because I'm a writing teacher and we're all writing together, we're gonna spend a few minutes just trying to write through these metaphors. So the way the dice work is that you get a noun and an adjective and another noun. And your idea is, or a concept he calls it, you take this red, white, blue roll and you get what is a metaphor. You've rolled one. And then you can use it as the first sentence of your poem, the last sentence of your poem, the title of your poem, or you can ignore all of that and just see what bubbles out of your head. So the first roll I rolled is love is a small town wonder. Give you a second to think about that. Love is a small town wonder. What does that make you think about? My second roll, the mind is a backhanded superhero. That one I like a lot. And then the third roll is my soul is a well-worn sideshow. So there's 3 roles. Oh, I gave you a bonus role. I forgot about this one. The dog is an unspoken home. We'll come back to that one later. But here are those 3 roles. They're on the screen for you. I'm going to set a timer. And in fact, I have set a timer. And we're going to write together for 4 minutes. So this will be the awkward silent part of the webinar where we all are quietly writing together. Colleen, yes?
Oh, we should play music. But I have a question. I pick one of those. I don't have to do all 3.
You are the poet. You are the maker. You can pick one. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
But you get to pick up what you want to pick up. So pick one and we'll all write together. I have my pen and I'm going to start the clock and we'll just write to either the mind is a backhanded superhero, my soul is a well-worn slideshow, or love is a small town wonder. So let's all be in a place of writing together and write. Quick writing check. There's about 40 seconds left. Keep going if you want to. If you're feeling brave and you're excited about what you did, you might throw it in the chat room and we can all see it. If you're not feeling brave, you might send it to a friend.
Ooh, what if we just want to share a phrase?
If you want to share a phrase, that's fine too. But I'll have you use the last 20 seconds to share in the chat what you want to share. If you do, if you haven't tweeted this already, you're welcome to do that too. And I'll stop the timer so as to not bug you with the last final trumpet that says time's up. But hopefully you got some writing done. And this is how we kick off these workshops. The poem I read to you earlier is one I wrote when Katie and I were facilitating one of these before. To hope is like owning a trophy. So you see how you can throw that metaphor in there and play around. I cheated. I actually rolled a 4th thing. There's very little cheating when it comes to these sorts of things, but I rolled, I am a cryptic party clown, and I loved that so much, so I'm keeping it forever, and I got some lines out of there. Yeah, so we did some writing. Katie, what do we do next?
Well, I'm curious if there's any writing in that chat window coming through. Ah, yeah, look at that. Oh, that's nice. There's been quite a lot of writing here, quite a lot of making. Very nice. I'm going to keep us going, and I hope that there will be time. This last half of our webinar is set up so that we can have a really nice conversation together, and you can ask your questions and we can all engage. But I just want to share with you that what you just experienced, but if I go like this, can we go to the next slide? Thank you. Because I just tried to click to the next slide and it turns out I can't. Okay. So what you just experienced here in the webinar is exactly what you might experience in one of these workshops, where we will roll the dice together, we do some writing together, but pretty quickly we like to give the dice to you so that you can begin to make and compose with some of those ideas, both with the words on the dice, but also with those robotics tools. So that composition of the poem really begins to take form right from the first roll of the dice. So you see we've got folks writing, you've got pen and paper, the dice, the LEDs, the electronics are right there. We have, we have our other supplies are out. We have cardboard, we have paper, we have some found objects there on the table. And some folks like to begin composing their poem with those materials right away. And so pretty quickly you have folks building linkages with popsicle sticks and brass brads. And if you look at the screen there on the left, we have make code open. We're programming. That poem is taking shape right away through code. And here on the right, we have folks processing differently, composing differently with the poem that they're working on. All part of that prototyping phase or that rough draft stage of beginning to think about that poem and bring it to life. And so part of this has to do with the design of the classroom. Right away, we like to get people set up so they know where to find those learning materials. We don't want to stop and tell you how to make your poem. We want you to be able to find the right tools at the right time so that you can make the poem that you are creating. So we lay a strong foundation of what materials are available and how to find them pretty quickly in the workshop. So for example, here, folks can, depending on the device that they brought or the software language that they want to program in, people can self-select the tool that they're using, the device that they're programming on, and the language that they want to create their poem in. So this tool allows for that natural differentiation in the classroom. So from the first roll of that dice, you have that composition taking shape. So finally, once you make that selection of the tools that you're using, the digital tools that you're using, you're provided with a personalized suite of resources. These are your programming tutorials. So if you decide that you need an LED to blink because love is a small town wonder, you can find that tutorial right away to program that blinking, wondrous small town that is the love, if that's just what you decide to do. We've got Build, the Teach, and the other resources are really geared more for classroom teachers, including that project you see there on the Teach page, which integrates Makey Makey with Hummingbird and a really cool robotic dog. So if you're looking for another integration of the two tools, definitely check that project out. So finally, I just want to share with you, in a setting like this where you're asking folks to compose with robots and compose with words, compose with metaphors, it might seem overwhelming to think, how can I manage a space like this? Especially if I'm an English teacher and maybe departmentalized, or running a library makerspace, and I have 400 or 500, 600 kids coming through a library in a single day. It can be overwhelming to think about the management of that space. And it really does come down to clear organization of material and letting kids know how to access those materials as they need them. So in a workshop like this, I want to share some examples of what came out of the workshop in about an hour. Okay, so these are absolute beginners who rolled that dice at the start of the hour. And here's a nice little robot. Actually, it's on its way to becoming a wagon like this. If you see those little servo motors under the Hummingbird there, it says, "My soul is a well-worn sideshow." And those motors spin and the lights flash. Look at the next one. A dog is an unspoken home. And this one's fun because when you get close to the doghouse, you see the distance sensor there, that doghouse begins to shake around because the dog gets excited that you're coming home. And Bud, did you want to say anything about the dice and the order of the dice there?
Yeah, I did. I've said a couple of times that there aren't a lot of rules, and the people who are the poets and the makers get to make the decisions about how stuff works and what the rules are for these sorts of things. Technically, the dog is an unspoken home is a backwards metaphor, according to the official way that dice work. But the goal in getting kids to use language these ways and to getting folks to use robots and parts these ways is to get expressive and to find something that gets you started. And for this particular role and this particular maker, the order was wrong. Home as an unspoken dog didn't move them. They flipped the idea and suddenly they had this great, I mean, when people get into a robotic poem, they start to shake like the doghouse shakes because you get excited and your body moves and you might scribble some words and then you go to make it. But usually you have to remind people that there aren't rules so much to break or there aren't rules so much to follow as there are to break. And so I just wanted to make sure I called that out.
Absolutely. I think we have just a couple more quick examples here. The next one is the mind is a backhanded superhero. And this robot will backhand you if you get too close. And so you have the distance sensor, a servo motor, and just a little structure there with the cardboard. And so while people are building out these robotic poems, they're building out in a lot of other ways, including this poem, which comes from Love is a Small Town Wonder. And I can't actually read it well enough with the camera right in front to be able to read it to you, but I hope that you also begin to appreciate that that poem can be made as well, that the making does take shape with the poetry as well. So we'll look, yeah.
Well, I just want to say too, and it's an iterative process, right? The idea of a poem robot and a robot poem is some people start with words and go to physical things. Some people start with physical things and go to words. Neither one of them's right. Neither one of them's wrong. But when you get some words down, you might start to see physicality in a different way. And when you get some physicality down, you might start to see the words differently. And so when you have, as Katie likes to say, multiple tools of composition available for a poetry moment, you can really go back and forth in these really powerful ways that make the words more powerful and it make the visuals and the physicality more powerful as well.
Yeah, the composition is where the learning is taking place. It's in that space of composing. Even if I can't see what the child or the learner is composing because they're thinking it, that composition, that construction of knowledge, that actual act of breaking down and building up, whether I'm doing that with cardboard or words or robots, or just in my own mind processing information, or, you know, the flow between the 2 and the 3 and the 4, it's impossible to know where one starts and one ends. And so making space for that composition and thinking of composition as where the learning takes place, I think is important to think about composition across the curriculum. And so in this space, you get these really transformative learning opportunities for adults as well. And this is a really great story from from a science teacher who came to one of the workshops. And he came to the workshop because it was robots, and he wanted to learn about sensors for his classroom. And he had done some writing that day with the poetry activities, and he left saying, "Does writing always make you feel this way?" And he was affected by the writing process in a creative and profound way. And he wanted to know how he could integrate more writing into his science classroom. And so these experiences that are divergent and open us up, that involve multiple tools of composition, can really have profound effects on our lives and really help us to think in interdisciplinary ways that are beyond just integrating the 2, one in the other, one, you know, back and forth, but really transforming and making something new that didn't exist before.
Yeah, integration is such a word, because it implies that they don't belong together. Like we're trying to make this thing do. And I don't think that's where the magic of starting to fiddle with these boundaries like you guys do so well is really important. Integrating assumes that English and robots are not the same thing. Remember that Greek root, the poet and the maker, they're all the same person. They're all the same, it all comes from the same place. I think it's really powerful.
Hey, can you go back like 2 slides so we can see one of the robot metaphors? Actually, go back at least one more. I think it was the dog one. I want to leave it at this one. So I wanted to say, because we had talked when we were planning this, you know, and I said, well, is it like, what I think I've seen a lot, and what maybe I've even done is, you know, like I'm going to make something and then I'm going to write about it. And, you know, I think that's what we've said, like, that's a great place to start. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but this is divergent. This is really a different way of thinking, because even I took a minute to really understand what you were saying and realized that we wrote the poem and then they made a physical representation of that poem. And so now we can see that the dog is a home because he's shaped like a home and he has the motion sensor and he does something when you get home. Like, and so it's really taking poetry analysis to like another level, like kind of a level that, you know, we would love to see our kids do, right? Like we'd love to see them thinking about the actual metaphor and how would they build a physical representation of that. So I think that really goes along with make writing. I'm sure you guys have heard of make writing, and I'm gonna put that in here. It's by Angela Stockman, and it's really, she's written that for younger kids, and it's kind of about taking the writing process and being a making process and like, you know, writing and constructing your sentences with Legos, stuff like that, right? So super cool ideas. And I feel like this is really along that vein. It's not just taking the writing out. We're not writing, we're still writing like we just did it, right? And I think that's a really important part that sometimes people miss when they try to do the make writing. They're making instead of writing, and we're doing this all together, right? Like this is all part of it. And
they're not separate. Yeah, they're not separate.
Right. That's what I think you're saying. And that's what you're saying about integration. They're not separate. They are together. Hang on, Mark has a good question. Well, we're going to think about Mark's question, because we have a couple other things to share, and then we will actually answer questions. So if anyone wants to put questions from the audience in, you can. I like that. So I'm going to share a couple of Makey Makey poetry ideas. And then we did say, we talked about robots that are poems and robots that generate poems. And so actually, when I started doing poetry and Makey Makey stuff together, happened because I had seen at my husband's school, they had made a poem kind of like they did the I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, and they had a physical representation of the caged bird. But that was like putting it together with craft items, not necessarily building a robot that would do that. And I wish I had thought about putting my hummingbird project in here from last week. And I think I just thought I would share it visually, but it's a video. And so I don't know, I guess I could try to pull it up real quick. But last week I was at an Invent to Learn workshop with Sylvia Martinez and Gary Stager. And they had done this prompt that really we could have turned into a poem too, but it was And I think that's why my brain thought, well, I made a robot and I should make a poem about it. It kind of went backwards. And instead of the poem driving the robot was going to drive the poem. So our prompt was, the Easter Bunny is sick. Can you deliver eggs? Like you have to deliver an egg hunt, drop eggs somewhere. And we ended up making this little robot that looks like it pooped chocolate eggs, which is really funny, me and my team. And that's why I wanted to write a poem about it, because to me that was really funny, like a pooping robot. Maybe I just hang out with 5-year-olds too much. That's just my hummingbird. There's no pictures there, so unless I steal the screen, we can't see it. But I want to talk about how I saw this poetry analysis need, and I've never seen students like do a great job with poetry analysis. I mean, if you've taught English, raise your hand, and you know how hard it is to get kids to analyze a poem. They're just like, oh, I don't want to read this thing, you know. So what I did was I'd had them find a poem that spoke to them, or a poem that they wanted to think about, and then visualize that poem in 4 images. That's how I started this. And they just drew those images, and then they connected that to Scratch, and they read the poem. And what I found was students who had never spoken a poem out loud with tone were suddenly doing that, right? So they were actually reading the poem. I know how the caged bird sings, you know, because they had an audience and they didn't have to have anyone see their face because they were doing it in Scratch. So recording their voice like in that way made them all actually speak with the correct intonation. It was kind of an amazing thing to see. So now, Bud, I get to do the funny next slide move. And then I took that, that idea, I really loved it, but then I wanted them to create poems. And I thought the same as you, how can the actual process of drawing circuits be the poem? How can we actually create a poem by drawing circuits? So instead, I took Austin Kleon's Blackout Poetry idea, and actually, David Saunders did this before me. All I did was write a guide on how to do it and keep instructing people and pushing it out on the internet. So I wanted to give David Saunders some credit. He used to be at the Greenwich County Day School in Connecticut, but now he's somewhere else. He moved. But it's kind of also, I noticed that Wonderful Idea Company was sharing a workshop in this too, because they had seen my workshops like this, and they call it digital erasure poetry. So they actually took this idea and went even further with kind of changing the words, changing the way the poem is written into something that's really digital. So in essence, a blackout poem is finding an old discarded book and blacking out the words you don't want and only circling the words you do want. And I always do this like with teachers now, because to me, it's just so much fun. And I loved the visualization that in this frame, you can see that woman drew like a family holding hands. So I love that she actually went a little further and made it kind of arty. So if you go to the next one, I think there's even another picture. It's not. So I have a link to share that I have to find and send you guys, but go back one more still to the Blackout Poetry. I had a teacher who made the words pop up in Scratch. So the coding was more than just when I click this, do that. You know, it also actually added the digital animation. And again, the Blackout Poetry, this is actually the way I started teaching high schoolers to use Makey Makey instead of a banana piano. I know. They had to draw their circuits and they would touch them. And I actually have a great troubleshooting video. I'll see if I can find it and share it also with you guys. But they would draw and their circuit would be shorting out, and they would go, well, I only want this word and I want to touch this word separately. And I'm like, well, look, where do you see that you've drawn your circuits together? And they could actually erase their circuit, right? So instead of alligator clipping and figuring all these things out, they're actually drawing those circuits and seeing where they've made a mistake. And for me, that's like so cool, because we don't really have in the curriculum to like teach kids all these things about circuits. It's not really in there. There's pretty much turning on a light bulb and then in 4th grade, and then we push them out the door. But all this really complicated physical computing is done with an understanding of breadboarding, which for me, like I was like, what is breadboarding? But once I started doing paper circuits and sewing circuits, all of a sudden I understood how to breadboard. Like no one ever taught me how to breadboard. No one ever taught me any of this stuff. I just played until I figured it out. So, which comes full circle to my poetry idea I shared yesterday, and I am going to steal the screen for a second, in just a second, and show you my scratch code, just because it's really not complicated. It's so easy, and I wondered why I'd never thought of this before. So I took the first idea of images that are themes in the poem, and now you have a poem generator. So my goal is to make the robot that actually will move, and you'll control him, and he'll say funny things, and hopefully, my idea was kind of like he might do some kind of motion associated with that concept. I'm not really sure, but I'm sure once I start building it, my poem ideas will change. But you have 4 big things, and you as the creator can choose, do I want him to read, you know, a poem about trees, or bugs, or the sun, and then the last one I did confidence. So I thought, ooh, that's cool, because I have to make kids generate phrases about confidence. And then you just generate phrases for each topic, and when you touch it, it randomly creates a fun poem for you. So I shared that on Twitter yesterday. And oh, I love that people are still sharing the poem.
Me too.
Poem they wrote.
Awesome,
let me
Kristen.
see if I can steal the screen.
Yep.
I stole it. And I'm going to go to Zoom.
Ooh. Kristen, love that.
And I'm going to just go to this, because this is how easy it is to create this code. It's just picking a random sound, but my sounds aren't actually random. It's just picking random from the sounds I've created. So in Scratch, when I've created these 10 different sounds, it's only picking the sounds that go with that particular code I want it to go to. So space is hooked to, well, let me play it. I don't think you could hear it because I have my headphones in, but space is the sun. So all 3 of those recordings go to the sun. All 3 of the up arrow recordings go to, why am I doing that when I have it sitting right here with me? All of those go to the sun, and Makey Makey's connected through the drawing. And then all my confidence ones go to this little guy who's wearing a superhero cape. And, you know, sounds 4 through 6 go to the tree, and sounds 7 through 10 go to the bug, right? So just kind of, I thought, wow, that's kind of a cool way to make kids think about writing poetry. And even still, it reminded me of this weird book that my kid bought about mixing and matching that I also thought would be a great writing prompt. It's mixing and matching mythological creatures. And every phrase has a similar stance. So like you have to create this phrase that's going to make sense with the next phrase. So you're actually still teaching, like, not iambic pentameter per se, but you're teaching like how you're going, the meter, right? You are really teaching meter, and you are teaching rhyme. You're teaching those things because you still have to have them in there, but you're going to change all your wording and everything. So that will be fun. I didn't know that Taylor Molly had a Kickstarter for that. Oh, she brought me the book. This mix and match book is like, would be the coolest writing prompt, because you change the monster by flipping one thing, and the words, like the name has to go together, and even the phrases kind of on the summary really go together. So that's kind of cool. So she's clapping. Yeah, but that is those are some of the ideas for Makey Makey Poetry, and probably I'm going to share a bunch of links at the end here, because I just keep playing with Makey Makey Poetry and finding new ways to do things. So the question we had that was really good, Tom, well, you have to turn your mic on and tell us what that question was. And then I'm going to go hunt for all those links, but not while I'm sharing my screen, because that would be embarrassing.
Do you mean the question that I asked earlier, or is that I was reading?
Do yours first, and then Mark has the question about taking content vocabulary to poems and robots, something like that.
Yeah, and if you've been waiting to ask a question, now's a great time to throw those in the chat as well.
Oh, totally. So my question is I'm intrigued by insights that people may have gained, and you've touched on this a little bit, but insights, realizations when we combine the two, the physical creation of creating these robots and then writing the poetry. This is new to me. I have never combined robotics and poetry, and I would guess that if you had a room full of people particularly just educators, if we just start there, what insights they just gain about themselves, about teaching, about learning. I'm really curious about that.
I have a quick thought, and there's a lot of personal stuff that ends up happening because when you go to a robotics workshop and suddenly you're writing poems, you dig up stuff, and I say that in a and I'm glad about that sort of way. Like, I mean, we work to make safe spaces and those sorts of things, but helping people to remember the joy of language, or pulling out a memory. Having a moment of frustration or fear or doubt or concern. These are things that teachers, and I say this as a teacher, we forget sometimes that the people that we work with don't like experience or have that fluency with language and comfort like we do. So that moment of dis or uncomfort can be really powerful for creating some empathy with a classroom student. But also, and Katie alluded to this earlier, I've seen several presenters or participants in our workshops start to see ways where they could fiddle with what tools they gave kids access to and when, in order to change what was going on in their classrooms too, right? So it's not magic that we're talking about the hummingbird, or we're talking about the Makey Makey, we're talking about words. It's just a good reminder that like we've never had a better tool set to help kids express themselves and understand the world, like ever. We just never have. And it's like reasonably priced and belongs in our classrooms. So that people can pick up the right tool at the right time to say the right thing.
Yeah, it reminds me of a quote or a conversation I was having with someone recently who said, children will draw things that they dare not say. So that something is inside of that child that they would like to express, but saying it isn't the right tool set. And so being able to draw it is actually really important for that child at that time. And so when you think about what's inside of a learner that maybe they dare not say, or they dare not write, or they dare not draw, but actually might come out in robotics, I think that giving kids more tools of expression, more tools of composition, and letting them express in their own way is really important, especially if you value innovation and creation and making something new. Making new space for students to say new things often, or not often, but can involve, I think, new tools.
Well, I think what I'm hearing you say is that as a teacher, what I'm always trying to do with all of this technology is to have people dig down and discover themselves, perhaps, and try to make the world a better place. And I think it's harder to make the world a better place if we don't understand what's going on inside, right? So I think as I have, sat here and I was working on, my poem, and the thought of creating some kind of physical thing that moves is not something I've ever done. And I suspect that it would, just the whole process would ask me to dig deep and explore what's going on inside. And that's what I really like about this whole conversation.
Yeah, I really like that, Tom. I think last week when I found my video, I'm going to share it with you guys, but last week when we were told to do this, my main goal was like, how am I going to connect it to Makey Makey? Like I got obsessed with that. But I made this Makey Makey controller in 5 minutes. Like I spent the whole time creating the robot. And what I loved about the prompt that Gary and Sylvia made a point was by saying we needed to create an egg dropper, they were instinctively asking us to make a mechanism, but we didn't know that. Do you know? Like we didn't realize we had to make a mechanism. We're just like, okay, well, I want to be able for it to drop eggs. And I think that this idea of poetry, especially in a collaborative setting, like creating a poem and a robot together, is just so much more impactful than doing it by yourself. Because I've been sitting here at home alone with my Hummingbird robotics kit, and it's different than being out with these people. So here is our, you can see it, right? It's just on my Instagram. Okay, just making sure you can see my screen. I'm gonna hit play, and I think I have to unplug my headphones and see if it'll play, if you can hear it. I don't know that there's, we created no, you can't.
You drive it forward.
So you drive it by touching.
There's the robot driving forward. Now turn it backwards. And then now stop it and make it drop the eggs. Drop the eggs.
Here they come.
Try right turn. Right turn. And then forward. And then, so,
Whoa, that was really loud. So the my team were 2 teachers from Ann Richards School. One was Anna Josephson. She's actually like a STEM teacher there at Ann Richards, and she has experience. She helped us build the robot, like having it drive. That's why she's like, now make it right turn. She got it to right turn and left turn and do all these things. And the other girl, Alexis, that was with us had never ever done any robotics, never done anything like this. So it was really cool to have like those 2 ends of the spectrum collaborating too. And yes, the egg drop, like we didn't mean for it to look like it was pooping. It was a very happy accident for us.
Anytime you can combine the words poop and happy accident in a classroom situation, I think is a win. Tom, I wanted to go back to something you said, because I'm somebody who comes at this from the poetry side, right? I love to write, I love to play with words, but I don't love, I don't have the same comfort with using physical stuff. And I've been watching a lot of people sculpt and design and draw and turn machines into things that feel and seem alive. And I brought with me today something I made the last time Katie and I were together, because it's a reminder to me of this notion. Now, this isn't amazing. This is somebody it's a person holding a broom, all right? It's not gonna win any awards. But for me, it's a big deal, because it was the first time I had one of those moments of just, oh, I think I could do this. And I've seen other people do it. And now here's the thing I can do with the stuff. And it helped me get into a poem that I knew pretty well. And I thought, I know this poem pretty good, and I'll just do this, and it'll be a nice visual of the poem. And as I was timing the movement of the broom, I realized that I had never read the poem properly, because I finally heard the rhythm of the words as I was getting the rhythm of the motor down. And so this back and forth of expression and trying to do it and reaching there, there's a lot of stuff going on there that I think is really, really important, both for kids and for grown-ups.
Yeah, and I think too that the magic of putting the 2 together is like putting the hummingbird and the Makey Makey together is sort of just something people don't think about, because everyone was like, wait a minute, how'd you do that? Witchcraft. And then they're like, oh, it was really easy. It was the same way you programmed it in the first place. You did it with the arrow keys, and then you just connected it to something else, right? So it's just it's super easy to put them together. That's why I wanted to do the drawings that actually had something that would change it, right? Like, because I'd use the Cadbury eggs because I thought it was funny, but I wanted to use drawings because then I have to use my brain to think of a visual representation of, it was kind of hard when I went, how am I going to draw confidence? Like, how in the world, how do you do that, right? Like, how do you draw confidence? How do you draw trust? And so I think that that makes it a really good writing, as the English teacher in me thinks, that makes it a good writing problem for students, is having that, how am I going to draw a visual representation of a theme? Same way with creating that whole robot that goes with it. So now I feel like the robot I actually create that's going to go with these drawings is going to be totally amazing. I want us to share what Ian Maddie said he did with his group. So he said he had a group of high school students take passages from Frankenstein and create robotics to represent the passages in ways that they liked. And it was inspired by you. And just because they all love horror films, they're like poetry recitation shined. And that's what I'm saying about putting it in Scratch, like just adding that audio recording. Kids will do amazing things that they never did before, because standing up in front of your peers is embarrassing. But recording your voice off in secret and then letting them play it is a lot like social media. So they're okay with that. Like, they're cool to do that.
Well, and Frankenstein's a hard text. So building things that would help you get into the mind of the monster, who's really the smartest person in that whole book, I think is a great way to interrogate the text in a way that doesn't feel like Billy Collins is. You mentioned sort of this idea earlier. The way we get through a poem is we sit it in the corner and we beat it with hoses till it confesses.
Yeah.
Brock's talking about environmental dilemma. First of all, that's the coolest name for a class I think I've ever heard of. Environmental dilemma inquiry. I mean, that's intimidating, right? I don't know that I would pick that class. But I would love to know what sorts of things he's thinking about doing with robots and language and solving environmental dilemmas.
Also want to point out Kathleen Fugel's poetry writing as a maker activity, robotics as a literary activity. That's our tagline, you guys. Like, we're going to make that our tagline.
I mean, the more and more Katie and I talk about this stuff, the harder problem I have saying robot and poem. I just start to see the robots as poems. They're happenings, right?
Yeah.
And so it makes it harder to talk about. But you know, if you made it in science class and it gets you through that project, it's okay. It's still a poem.
Right. You said that to me too when we were planning. I was like, what do you mean robot is a poem? But now I feel like I understand. Like I really get it now that you've shared these ideas. That's super cool. I want to see if anyone else has any questions. And if not, I mean, I think we've packed a lot into 50 minutes and probably it's time to go eat some tacos. It's Tuesday, right? That's why I do this on Tuesday.
Taco Tuesday. That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, because we're all Lego movie fans. Oh, I guess I have to cut this out of the YouTube video or I'll get sued or something.
I think it's okay to mention it. I think we're good. I won't do any scene by scene.
Somebody mentioned, and now I'm just being totally random, so I apologize, but I don't have anyone to share this with other than you guys, this 100 people on this webinar. Someone mentioned that their school got sued for a retweet. And I was like, whoa, that's kind of crazy. I've never heard of that. Like, because they had taken a picture of a text and hadn't cited it, and they got sued for that.
Boo.
Okay,
Ooh,
so
Dragons
that's a
Love Tacos is a great
librarian dilemma. Dragons Love Tacos would be a great inspiration for robots, by the way.
Agreed.
Just thinking.
Since
Oh,
we're
would you
sharing
explain
the-
again about the horses and the cart? You were talking about it before the webinar started. Katie, that's you. Like,
Oh yeah, Katie, please do.
Oh, wait, you want me to share this?
yeah, she wants you to share that and why it always points west, young man.
Oh, would you explain again about the horses and oh, yes. So this little rover essentially is just a little covered wagon made with a hummingbird. There's a million ways you could integrate Makey Makey to make this even more interactive. But right now it's programmed to always head west using the compass in the microbit. So if I were to turn this little guy on here, I'm
That's
gonna turn the
brilliant.
power on. Here, we'll let it get kind of warmed up. Can you see that little guy?
Yeah.
Going off the
And
west
now we
is
know which
towards
way
me.
west is.
I'm
You're
west.
That's so
So
funny.
yeah, this is our little west traveling covered wagon here.
I do want to say that the way that we matched the robot, the hummingbird robot with Makey Makey was sort of a trick because they did use a Bluetooth adapter for the hummingbird to connect to Snap, which is not Scratch, but looks exactly the same. And once you get your feet around there, it's actually pretty cool. A cool programming language which I had used a long time ago. So this was like updated because I don't know if you know this, Katie, but we have a hummingbird project in our Big Makerspace book.
Nice.
You know that?
No, I didn't. That's awesome.
Yeah, but I didn't write it. My husband did. So
That's cool.
but
Before we jump off, Bud, did you have a book? Or did I know, Colleen, you shared a book. I didn't know if, because I brought one
Can
too.
I share 2 books? I'm at the library, so I have to
please share
So,
books.
First thing, this has nothing to do with what we're talking about today, except it's my favorite poetry book of the year. It's Carrie Fountain's Instant Winner. It's not written this year. It's not from this year, but I love this book and everybody should check it out. This is the important and appropriate book. This is a book that just showed up in our library this week. And I love working at a library because that's how my life is now, is things just appear. It's called This Is a Poem That Heals Fish by Jean-Pierre Simeon, illustrated by Olivier Talik. I think I've pronounced that name right. This is like the greatest, oh, what's a robot, what's a poem sort of story. And I won't read it to you right now, but I shared some of it with Katie last week and I can't stop thinking about the book. So you shared that.
Excellent book. Yeah, and actually because you shared that book with me, This Is a Poem, I went home and was like, what? I need to get that book and add it to my shelf, but I grabbed 2 that are some of my favorites. Langston's Train Ride. I love this book. If you haven't read it, you should go get it right now. It's the story of the moment when Langston Hughes begins to think of himself as a writer. through the writing of this poem called The Negro Speaks of Rivers. It's a beautiful, beautiful story. I personally love reading it myself. Kids of all ages will enjoy it. And then finally, if you're looking for a really fun book to read aloud, Once Upon a Twice is a Jabberwocky-style tale for kids of all ages. And when you think about composition and using robotics tools to tell stories, this is using words in new ways. If you think about like those portmanteau from Jabberwocky, we've got a really nice tale here. So I hope you'll check out Once Upon a Twice.
I'm going to bring a book then. I'm good at this. Look,
Sweet.
I had my kid bring me a book. Peter Reynolds, you might know him as the author who wrote The Dot. He wrote Say Something. And little known fact, I found out last week, Peter Reynolds went to the Constructing Modern Knowledge Invent to Learn workshop like over the summer one year. So I thought that was really cool. But Say Something is really cool because it's not just saying things with words, which is what we've been talking about this whole time. It's saying things in other ways. So if you see someone lonely, say something by just being there for them. If you see something beautiful, say something with your paintbrush, right? So it's kind of cool because that's what we just said. If you see something like this, we're going to Oh, he went the first year. Maureen knows that he went the first year. But if you see something that makes you want to make an invention, then create a robot. Or create a poem. Or create a happening that is a poem and a robot.
Nailed it.
And
Nice.
with that, yeah, snap, snap, snap. With that and 52% battery power because Zoom takes up a lot of power. I want to thank everyone for coming today, and I want to thank Katie and Bud for sharing their poetry and robotics ideas. Tom, thanks for always being on here and helping out. It's really great because we can't do this by ourselves. And I love how different this was from the last workshop. Last webinar. We keep doing these webinars, and it's basically me coming up with people that I like to talk to and want to share their ideas. We did it. So if you missed anything on our YouTube channel, you can see the Invent to Learn workshop with Sylvia Martinez. The last workshop we did with Trisha Rafi was like, I cried during it. It was about assistive technology and was really amazing. Oh, thank you, Bud. That is perfect to put up at the end here. See, Bud has to share this at the end credits. But before you say why, and then our next workshop, we're going to be, our next workshop is Build a Better Book, and I think Ian is actually going to be on that. Ian Maddie, who did the Frankenstein thing.
Oh, awesome.
And some other Coloradans. Did I say it right?
You did.
Oh, I did. All right, awesome.
Yeah.
Some other Coloradans. Oh no, I messed up her name. Janet from Building 61, which is a super cool makerspace in Boulder, and then the other people from the University of Boulder. They're all doing Build a Better Book. Stacy's on too. Hey, Stacy. Stacy's also going to be in that webinar, and it's really cool because Ian kept talking about Build a Better Book, and I didn't really understand the concept until I went to Stacy's South by Southwest presentation, and it's actually building a book as an assistive device. Like, how can someone who can't see enjoy the book? Enjoy the images in the book and stuff like that. So it is really cool.
Cool project.
And then actually after that, we're hopefully launching our new product, and we'll be having some webinars about Q&A about our new product. So then we're taking a break for the summer, and we'll see you guys at ISTE. And that's what's it stand for again, Tom? International Society
for Technology and Education.
Yeah, so we'll be at ISTE. The whole Makey Makey team's gonna be at ISTE.
So will BirdBrain Technologies.
Say, are you going, Katie?
Yes, most of our team will be there. We've got a lot going on this year. We'll have to come see you guys. Yes.
Hang out in Philadelphia. Bud, are you going to come?
My library will not be there, but I don't know. Will there be fun things to make poems with? I suspect.
Yeah, I mean, ISTE is a technology conference, so there's really cool stuff. We'll see Kathleen there, it looks like. Yeah, so next webinar, I don't have the date. I mean, I do have the date, but I haven't announced it. And then, yeah, so thanks for coming. Come to our next one. If you can't make it live, you can always watch the recording. So thanks, everybody. Wait, I said wait. Oh man, I wish I hadn't said wait like that, because I would have been a good ending of the YouTube video, because I always edit it out.
It's important. You just cut it right there. You're set.
Everybody can leave. You don't have to hear everything, but please explain this White House picture.
In several years ago, I helped to build a makerspace in a preschool. At that time, somebody thought that was a really neat project, and I thought it was a pretty neat project too. And we ended up, I ended up being named as a champion for change
Awesome.
in Connected Ed. So I got to meet the president and high
Obama?
five. And
You met Obama?
yes, there were many. I will say that that particular administration did an awful lot of things to recognize an awful lot of people who were doing an awful lot of things. And it was a great group of people. I was happy to be there. It was fun times. Actually, Carolyn Foote, who you hung out with last week, was also in that group. She was named as well.
Yes, I was going to say, I met you guys kind of at the same time, and you both had that background. And I was like, wait, when did Carolyn go to the White House? But she wasn't with you. She was with another Champions of Change, right?
Nope. She was with me.
Oh, she was
We
with you.
sat next to each other. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh.
We got to hang out. It was a great excuse to meet some of my friends in Washington, D.C. So
Yeah, very cool.
it was a good
Katie,
time.
when are you going to the White House? I'm just kidding.
She was there. She was there very well. You were in the. You were.
She was in Morocco. Did you go recently?
No. You were. Tell the story.
What, when was I at the White House last? I mean, there's many stories here. I was in the White House last June. I was a team from Pennsylvania representing Pennsylvania for this federal state STEM summit. So we wrote the new 5-year federal STEM plan.
Cool.
I most recently went on a trip sponsored by the U.S. State Department to Morocco for a week to work with girls and teachers all over the country.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I went one time too.
To Morocco?
No, to the White House. But I didn't actually go to the White House. I went to the Maker Caucus. I was a speaker for Maker Education. I met Dale Doherty of Make It magazine, and it was pretty cool. And I know how Congress and everything works now, and I'm not going to talk about that because that would be inappropriate. But it was really, really an honor to go up there. And I went to that from Tim Kerrigan of the IMLS, which are really a great, amazing group for museums and libraries that is really good for all of us out here. And again, let's all be champions of change, just like Kathleen said. I love that. So thanks, everybody. Go enjoy your Taco Tuesday.